Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Is working? Oh, good. Well, I'll start officially and say good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being online. We will do questions at the end of today's presentation. And if you are joining us virtually, welcome. Please do put your questions in the chat. And we have somebody here that will let us know your questions as, at the end. So this morning's session is titled Pennsylvania's WIP in working with Plain Sect farmers. We're gonna really kind of cover the gamut, right? Because none of this work, while we might work in silos sometimes, it's all based on partnerships and working together and the various different pieces that that need to happen to get everything from the funding in place to the boots on the ground to get the practices on the ground. So I'll start by doing a little bit of brief background on Pennsylvania's WIP and the role of agriculture plays in that. And then I'll also touch on some legislative opportunities that we hope to see passed soon. And then we'll talk about a riparian buffer planting that I did with a partnership with Mauricio and the Choose Clean Water Coalition. And from there, Mauricio will be telling stories from the field and talking about his work with Plain Sect farmers in Lancaster County. And then we'll take questions. So I'm Renee Reber. I am a campaign manager of watershed advocacy at PennFuture. PennFuture is a statewide environmental advocacy organization. We do legal work, regulatory work, legislative policy. We also have a civic engagement program as well. And so real quickly, before we really dive into the materials, many of you may already be aware of Pennsylvania's important role in the Chesapeake Bay restoration efforts. However, if you're not, here's some of the, describing some of the relationship between Pennsylvania and the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is the actual old Susquehanna River Valley that flooded at the end of the last ice age when the glaciers all melted. And it supplies half of the fresh water in the Chesapeake Bay. In the upper reaches of the bay, that's actually 90%. So the water quality coming out of Pennsylvania is critically important to the Chesapeake Bay. And you can see here in this map of Pennsylvania that we have about half of the state is draining to the bay. And within that portion, we do have, this is all about local water quality in Pennsylvania. We do have 15,000 miles of impaired streams within our portion of the watershed. Across the state, about 1/3 of all of our streams are impaired. And so maybe the most important number on this is that Pennsylvania is contributing 43% of the excess nitrogen that's reaching the bay. So what this means is we have a long way to go to reach our Chesapeake Bay goals, particularly when it comes to nitrogen. We have 32 million pounds of nitrogen that need to be reduced by 2025. The story with phosphorus is a little different. Our wastewater treatment plants have invested significant amounts of money and has really brought our phosphorus goals on target, but we do have a long way to go with nitrogen. And I know you might notice on this slide that the date is 2017, which was the midpoint assessment for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. I have not updated the numbers on this slide because they haven't changed a whole bunch. But all of this comes at a great price tag. Our phase 3 WIP, our watershed implementation plan, has estimated that we have a $325 million gap to reach these goals. And that's out of a total price tag of $521 million annually. And so when you break that down by sector, about 70% of that is the funding needs for agriculture. And then our county pilots, when at the time of the phase 3 WIP, we had 4 counties. And so this is accounting for that. We now have 32 counties that have plans. But we face, we're significantly behind. We have a long way to go, as that one bar graph showed. And so some of the challenges that we face in getting there are, of course, we have a long way to go. We are a leading contributor to the excess nitrogen in the bay. And a lot of this, most of it, is non-point source unregulated water pollution. As I mentioned, our wastewater treatment plants are really a success story. So getting at this unregulated water pollution is much more difficult. While we might be half of the state in land, we only have 30% of the population, which is a political challenge, right? A lot of our legislative districts are outside of the watershed. And you can see here on these images put together by our friends at Conservation Voters of PA that we do not have a pro-environment majority in the legislature, which makes getting funding for clean water extremely difficult, as well as other good pieces of legislation that would be protective of water quality. We also have a very fragmented local government system, and that's where real decisions are made on land use, planning and decision making. Across the whole state, we have 63 counties, and that's over 2,500 municipalities. So real quickly here, for those of you that might not be as familiar with the WIP timeline, the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, total maximum daily load, started in 2010. And there were 3 phases of watershed implementation plans, or WIPs, to guide the process to get to all the practices on the ground by 2025. And we are on the 3rd and final phase, which came into effect in 2019. There was a little bit of action between the phase 2 leading up to the phase 3 WIP that helped bring help guide the phase 3 WIP process. And you'll see here, in 2014, the Chesapeake Bay states, jurisdictions in the watershed signed the 2014 Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, which reaffirmed their commitment to meeting these goals by 2025, and all states signed, including Pennsylvania. In 2016, we had the reboot strategy, which really brought a lot of things together that set the stage for the phase 3 WIP, including getting all of our 3 major natural resource agencies working together in planning and talking together. And we had the 2017 midpoint assessment, which led to the 2019 planning. So with the phase 3 WIP, we now have county action plans. And I would say this is one of, if not the biggest successes, or could be the biggest success of the phase 3 WIP. And so I mentioned earlier the county pilots, which were, okay, let me see if I can work. I'm afraid if I try, oh, I figured it out. I can't walk away from the mic. So here's the 4 county pilots down here, Lancaster, York, Adams, and Franklin. And so those were the first 4 counties to have their plans. And as I mentioned, we now have 32 counties. And the great thing about this is this actually brought people together at the county level instead of being a top-down approach, which had been the case before phase 3. We now have plans in all of those counties that are put together by local leaders, by local stakeholders, identifying the places where it makes sense to put practices, identifying the local challenges and issues to get there. So really a renewed effort and trying to make this happen, come together locally. But right now on our WIP timeline, we have the phase 3 amendment. Pennsylvania's original phase 3 WIP, I mentioned the date of 2019, fell short by 9 million plus pounds of nitrogen. So Pennsylvania had to resubmit their phase 3 WIP, which they did to EPA at the end of last year. On April 18th, EPA put out their evaluation of Pennsylvania's plan and found it to still fall short of those goals. So Pennsylvania now has 90 days to address those deficiencies, and that is in mid-July. And so we're not really sure what happens after that. This is the first time that EPA is really taking some strong actions against the state and doing increased inspections and enforcement compliance checks on our farms and our municipalities to really push Pennsylvania to move ahead and make more progress. And hopefully part of that, it's not only planning around nitrogen, but it's also some funding deficiencies as well. And so we have our state budget. Our state budget has to be passed by the end of June. And so that works really well in this timeline. EPA is calling for the state to put together an egg cost share, a state level egg cost share program where the state is contributing to these practices. So I mentioned that EPA is doing more inspections and compliance checks, but here's a whole list of potential actions that EPA could take if Pennsylvania does not come on target. And this was sent to DEP, to the state with the evaluation. So a lot of this is really, it's a regulatory perspective. It's increasing permitting authority, and EPA could even come in and put in federal standards where they don't feel the state is doing a good enough job with the water quality standards. So agriculture plays a huge role in our WIP. It's at least 75% of the planned reductions for nitrogen. And as I mentioned, most of our way to go is unregulated. Within the watershed, we have 33,000 farms, and these are predominantly small family farms. And you can see here that we have less than 400 CAFOs and less than 1,000 combined animal operations. And so these are the farms that have some form of regulation on them. So that's a pretty small number compared to the 33,000 farms, so largely unregulated. Agriculture is also very important to Pennsylvania's economy and heritage. Across the entire state, we have over 53,000 farms. You can see here that between actual production agriculture and then the businesses related to that. So Pennsylvania, for instance, is like the snack capital of the world. It's producing nearly $133 billion to the economy. And again, these are small family farms. The last agriculture census showed that the average net cash income of these farms is just over $42,000. So having a state cost share program, getting funding to farmers is an absolute critical piece to moving Pennsylvania closer to meeting its 2025 goals. When you look at the state, it is our second leading source of impairment, with polluting over 6,500 miles of streams. And so Lancaster County is a very important part of this story, and Mauricio is gonna talk about his work there. But Lancaster County represents 21% of Pennsylvania's total nitrogen reductions that we need to make. And the monitoring data that USGS oversees shows that this is the highest amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment across watersheds of relative size across the entire Bay region. So within the county, we have over 5,000 farms, and Lancaster County does produce the most sales and has the most land in agriculture in Pennsylvania. And when you look at the stream impairments in Lancaster County, nearly 90% of all streams in Lancaster County are impaired. And so here's Lancaster County, and really what this image is showing. And I mentioned that the county action plans, the Department of Environmental Protection did a great job of putting together toolkits full of data to help local folks make decisions. And this came directly from one of those toolkits. And so you can see that we have half of the land in Lancaster County is in agriculture, and about a quarter of it's developed and about a quarter of it's forested. So Lancaster County, compared to other counties in Pennsylvania, does not have as much forested land. And so I mentioned the importance of state funding. We do have some opportunities currently with the American Rescue Plans, which can be used on clean water. We have two bills, the Clean Streams Fund and the Growing Greener 3, that combined would direct $750 million towards clean water and conservation. The Clean Streams Fund would establish the Agricultural Conservation Assistance Program, or ACAP, which is a state cost share program. And that would receive, there's 6 programs in the Clean Streams Fund that would receive half of all the funding. And if the Clean Streams Fund passes, this would be Pennsylvania's first program dedicated just to clean water. We have the Growing Greener 3, which has been around since 1999. And this does more broad than just water. It works with our parks and farmland preservation, all things that are good for clean water, but does expand beyond just those best management practices for water. And this would be an infusion of $500 million to our Growing Greener 3 program, which is much needed. We also have the lawn fertilizer bill, which other states in the watershed passed something similar over a decade ago. But we are hoping to see lawn fertilizer legislation passed, which would help to the other side of the story, right? The non-agriculture components to make a dent in their, especially their phosphorus reductions. And so where my work and Mauricio's work crosses, this is a great example of some work that we did together this fall with the Choose Clean Water Coalition and our 2 organizations. We did a buffer planting. And unfortunately, I don't have pictures from the pre-event beforehand, but we did invite the local state rep and the local state senator to the buffer planting. We had the local rep come out and a member from the state senate, and we took time and we just conversed before the buffer planting, and Representative Greiner actually stayed and planted trees for a little bit. He lived just down the road from this farm, actually. So we were able to talk about the importance of clean water funding, and he was able to ask very specific questions and engage and really learn about what was happening on this farm and what was happening with our work. And the Alliance did a really great job of telling the story about how it takes several buckets of funding to be able to actually pull off this work. So here you can see us getting started. Great shot of Mariah Davis. The coalition came up and helped plant that day. And then it was Mauricio, I don't know if you have the numbers on you, but it was a pretty decent sized buffer. And so this is just looking at it from one direction. And if I can use my laser pointer again, the waterway was right there. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mauricio.
Thank you, Renee. Yeah, actually, I think it was 1.8 acres that we planted that day, and I think around 400 trees. We also excluded a wetland area that we just let it regenerate again. But yeah, it was a great activity. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mauricio Rosales. I'm the Pennsylvania Ag Projects Manager for the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. I am based in Lancaster County. The Alliance brings together communities, companies, and conservationists to improve our lands and waters. We envision clean streams and rivers flowing through resilient landscapes, care for the people who live, work, play in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So that's our mission and vision. I know, large vision, right? But we're trying to do this work one farm at a time. Just talk a little bit about the Alliance. Some of you probably are very familiar with our work, but just in case, we are relatively old-ish organization. We have been part of the community of the Chesapeake Bay for the last 50 years. We focus in 4 programs. We have our ag program, forest, green infrastructure, and stewardship and engagement. Those are our 4 pillars. And my work is on the agricultural program, and that is actually the newest program that Alliance has, and it's actually growing the fastest because, as Renee mentioned, we have so much that is coming from agriculture. So we figure that we should do more work in there, and we have been able to grow exponentially. And so the agricultural program has been part of the Alliance for approximately the last 6 years. We have done a lot of work in Pennsylvania, but now we're extending to our other areas. So the Alliance has offices in Richmond here, in Virginia, and also we have an office in Washington, D.C., and our headquarters in Annapolis, and finally, our office in Lancaster. We have been in Lancaster for like around 3 years. So we're very happy to be there. We realized that that's where we need to be. Before that, I think we were in Camp Hill, nearby Harrisburg, and we quickly learned that we need to go where the farmers are, right? And we have plenty of farmers in Lancaster County. So yeah, so some of the work that we are doing, although we have been engaging with communities in Lancaster, agricultural communities in Lancaster for a while, we now have this very exciting corporate sustainability initiative. This is a work that has started a few years ago when we first had a conversation with Turkey Hill Dairy. For those that might not be familiar with Turkey Hill Dairy, it's a local dairy processing facility in Lancaster. They make a lot of ice cream. Yummy, right? Who doesn't love ice cream, right? So that was kind of the first things that we love about it. But anyway, so they at the time were very committed to do more conservation work, and they introduced us to their partner, Maryland, Virginia Milk Producers Cooperative Association. I know it's a mouthful. So if you hear me saying Maryland, Virginia, I'm referring to that co-op for sure, just in case, just because the whole name is long. But I'm not referring specifically to the states. But yeah, so they introduced us to them, and we formed this wonderful partnership called the Turkey Hill Clean Water Partnership. That was the very first partnership that we created in conjunction with the Turkey Hill Dairy and the Dairy Co-op. And it's kind of a unique model because we are working directly with farmers and helping them to implement best management practices. Turkey Hill has asked that any milk provider they're working with, they need to have conservation plans. And unfortunately, many of the farms that are supplying, they do not have those conservation plans, or at least at the time that we started this, most of them didn't. So the very first step was to ask them to get their conservation plans. So that was the very first goal. And we activated this partnership with funding from NRCS and also from NFWF. And that's how we have been able to start this great partnership, which has grown exponentially. We have been so lucky that other leadership members from the food industry in Lancaster have been interested in also in conservation. And now we have a second partnership with Hershey and Llano Lakes. They are also interested in helping local farmers to implement best management practices. And not only for water quality, they're also looking at improving air quality. Many corporations, as you know, are pledging net zero or reducing emissions by certain year. So we quickly told them, and they have learned that many of the practices that we are implementing for water quality actually have an impact also in greenhouse emissions. Like for instance, the buffers that we just planted with PennFuture and the Clean Choose Water Coalition. Therefore, these corporations now are very interested in supporting the implementation of these practices, to the point that Hershey actually has committed $300,000 for this partnership, and that money is going directly to the farmers to do this work. We also have other partnerships that have started with Giant, and that follows basically the same model as the Turkey Hill. It's also a client of Maryland, Virginia, and that is a little different, but it's still trying to help local communities and to improve water quality. Because of the work that we have started with the corporate partners now, others are interested. We are now about to launch an official partnership with Organic Valley, the largest dairy co-op in the United States. And also we are having very exciting conversations with poultry companies such as Purdue, Coleman, and Jaguar Goods, and a couple other local poultry companies. So that is very exciting. Our work is expanding not only in the dairy industry, but also in the poultry industry. Everybody is interested in water quality, air quality, habitat. So this is very exciting that finally corporations and private corporations, are interested in helping our communities. So why did I brought up, all this corporate sustainability, and we're supposed to talk about, Plain Sect farmers here? Well, most of these farmers that we're working are Plain Sect. As you know, a lot of the agriculture is happening in Lancaster County, and you all know that the majority of the Plain Sect communities live in Lancaster County. Therefore, they're the ones providing all this food that is being produced and delivered to these other corporations. Therefore, we have been working with the Plain Sect community. Most of them are Amish, a few Mennonites. And here there is a disclaimer. I'm going to be talking a little bit about them, obviously, but I am not a social scientist. I haven't conducted any research with them. I'm just sharing my experience. So full disclaim. I know there are universities that are doing research with these communities. So feel free to look at them. But just briefly, we have around 36,000 households that are Amish in the region, and that includes Ohio, New York, and Pennsylvania. And it's one of the farming communities that is growing. The number of Amish duplicates every 20 years. So this is huge. They're here to stay. As a matter of fact, on the other hand, I guess, what we call English farmers, which it could be a standard farmer, their numbers is reducing and their age is increasing. So I guess we are fortunate in Pennsylvania that we have the Plain Sect community that is still interested in farming, but nevertheless, it's not an easy task. And although they are very resilient and very strong community, they're still in big need of help. As I was saying, most of these farmers are dairies. We have around 9,000 dairies in this area that covers Ohio, New York, and Pennsylvania. And I believe in Lancaster, we have approximately maybe 1,500 dairies. So yeah, Lancaster is a dairy county for sure. And most of these farms are small. Very small farms. They don't have more than 80 cows. And you wonder why they don't have more. It's because all the labor comes from the family. And that's what most of the families can take care of without have to hire labor. So that is most of the reasons. And also because the land is so expensive that they cannot afford to get more and to feed more cows. So most of these farms don't have more than 100 acres, best case scenario. So again, it's just smaller scale. And these communities are not only doing dairy, they're doing a little bit of everything. As I said, farming is difficult, especially dairy farming has been challenging for the last 7-8 years, low milk prices. So you wonder how these people can still be in business, right? Well, they do a little bit of everything. In Lancaster, we have seen that many of these farmers are doing other cash crops, such as tobacco, that keeps growing in Pennsylvania, specifically in Lancaster, but they also are very creative and they are very handy. So many of them are working in construction. Many of the older children are working off farm and bringing some income that helps the overall financial situation of the farm. They are also very handy and doing a lot of baked goods and other things, nurseries, and also a lot of produce. So they're very creative and resilient, but they still want to keep the cows. Although the cows most of the times are losing money. But actually today the milk price is relatively good, but inflation is also high. So it's all about the margins, right? So margins probably are still tight. So now, how do we work with this community? And this is our process, very briefly. As I said, we work with the dairy co-ops, Maryland, Virginia, mainly now Llano Lakes in Organic Valley, and they have an established relationship with the farmers. Now, all we know that the Amish have been not very keen on taking funding from the government, right? Like we have seen that. We have tried to work with these communities, and unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of progress with them because they don't want to have anything to do with the government or whatsoever. So when someone, from instance, just an example, NRCS, for instance, is showing up to a farm and they don't have established relationship there, they're likely not to be very successful, unfortunately. But when you go and talk with them and you join the dairy co-op in these visits, they're more likely to listen to you because they have a really strong relationship with the field rep in that farm that has been part of that farm maybe for, I don't know, years and years. So they know very well the farmer, they know the situation, therefore they are more likely to listen to you. So Maryland, Virginia has been very good at sending also surveys. With that information we collected, we're able to identify farmers that are very interested in moving forward. So we visit these farmers and we talk about conservation. And then the second step is to talk about funding options. And that's where we also have been successful, thankfully, because the funding that we're using that is coming from different sources, NRCS, NEFWEB, the Keith Campbell Foundation, all that has helped us to do this work and offer options to the farmers. And they have really liked that. And once they have said yes to a project, then we bring the technical service provider. That it could be in Pennsylvania, it's a lot of private technical service providers. I know in Virginia and Maryland might be different. You guys probably rely more on the districts and NRCS, but in Pennsylvania, we have a strong private TSP sector that is helping us to move forward. So we introduce technical service providers regardless if the farmer has an established relationship with one particular technical service provider, they can continue that, and they really appreciate that. And then the TSP completes the engineering and the design, and then we also help them to get permits. And then we have a pre-construction meeting when we go over the project with the farmer, with the technical service provider, and the contractors. That's when the contractors get involved. And guess what? We are very fortunate that we can pay those contractors directly. And that's one of the things that has made us a little different, because other programs are reimbursements. Therefore, they cannot, the farmers have to upfront all that cost and wait for all the paperwork to be done in order to get their money back. That model sometimes doesn't work. Not everybody has a good line of credit. No one has sometimes sitting $100,000 or $200,000 sitting doing nothing, right? Especially farming communities. Therefore, by paying the contractors directly with our grants, we have been successful and able to help them to implement these projects. And lastly, obviously, the implementation, where we bring again all the parties involved, the dairy co-op, the technical service provider, and the alliance, and we just shake our hands and we are done. And hopefully we'll have a ripple effect, and hopefully the neighbors will listen, right? And that has happened many times. Again, our approach here, just to show you a little bit of how we do it. And I'm not saying that the other programs, the traditional programs, don't work. They do work. They're, especially in Lancaster, they're always busy. However, we have just seen that our programs can also have a success, where programs are flexible. And I'm going to give you an example of that. For instance, we know that riparian forest buffers are very important. And by NRCS standards, they need to be, right now, I think it's 50 feet, right? That's the width that they need to have in order to be co-shared by NRCS. Well, our programs are more flexible, and we allow farmers to implement buffers that are 35 feet wide, and that is an average. So that means that, because the farmers most of the times tell us like, well, I want to plant the buffer, but I don't want to lose land. And I understand that. I mean, land is so expensive, and they need to squeeze every single inch of that land, right? But unfortunately, you know, sometimes we need to ask them to take a little bit off to plant these buffers. But we know that they also have areas that are more marginal, that are wet, that every year they keep trying, like, I'm gonna plant, but it gets flooded again. So then like they don't get much out of those fields. So we told them like, hey, why don't we expand the buffer here and narrow where it's drier? Therefore, we can make up for, in average, we're going to have 35 feet. So that is what I mean by flexible, that our programs, we tend to work with the farmers, work with everybody, with the party, so we can make that happen. Preferred TSPs, I mentioned that they can work with whoever they want. They like that rather than just impose them at a specific TSP. And incentives, that's another big one that has worked very nicely in Lancaster. And this is not something that we created. This is something that others offer. For instance, we have our buffer bonus. Basically, for each acre of buffer that a farmer implements, they can access to additional $4,000 per acre with a max of $20,000 for the implementation of other best management practices. Let's say that a farm is interested in manure management system, and they also can implement a buffer, but they're not really keen on planting the buffer, but they really want the manure storage. So we come and say, hey, we're gonna do the buffer for you, zero cost to you. We co-share that 100%, including any other BMP related to the buffer. And then we offer you additional money for your manure storage. Huge win. Like, farmers love that concept. And to make the deal even better, we offer 3 years of maintenance for the buffer, because that is the second thing that a producer is going to tell you, like, oh, I don't want the buffer because I don't have time to maintain it. I hear you. You are super busy. You don't have time. Therefore, having maintenance taken care of, it's probably a good deal for you, and it is many times. So we offer 3 years of maintenance. So we go and mow a couple of times a year, and we spray when we can around the trees, so to prevent the weeds and competition for the little seedlings. And we have been successful and have been implementing a number of practices. So this is just some of the numbers that and the practices that we're implementing. For the agricultural BMPs, we have been able to implement around 150 structural BMPs. That includes the most popular ones that are manure management systems. That would be, and I'm going to have photos of that so you can see them very soon. And heavy use area, that it's a very vague name for a number of things, but I'm going to explain a little bit more about it later. Animal walkways, stormwater control. So those are some of the most popular BMPs that we're implementing. And with these partnerships with our corporate partners, we have been able to implement approximately 55 acres of buffers in different farms. And again, this is just with our corporate partners. That doesn't even count all what our forest team is planting with other programs. So this is just with our corporate partners. And our practices in the forest group include also stream exclusion and drinking waters. That's another big one. Like, so now I'm fencing off my stream, where my horses are going to be getting water from. That's a legit good argument, right? So like, we have to also provide waters for the animals. Can you say a few questions for last, if you don't mind, please? Yes. No, that what you just refer is a crossing. Animal walkway would be basically just an aisle that is directing the cows to a specific area. Yep. And I think with this partnership with the different co-ops, we have reached around 100 farmers or even more now with a structural BMPs. I mean, we have touched probably twice as much number of farmers, but just with the structural BMPs, that's kind of the number. So here are some photos of what I have been talking about. Manure storage, again, huge. On the left, you have the before, and on the right, you have the after. This is a farm that did not have manure storage at all. And why is so important, manure storage? Because otherwise they pile the manure in very bad conditions, and when it rains and just generates runoff. So terrible. And now we're targeting manure storage for 6 months with these structures that are very traditional. You can see this round tanks all over the place. Most of the small farms do that. But yeah, this farm in particular did not have any. They were spreading manure almost every day. Some cases there is manure storage. However, it's not enough sometimes, unfortunately, and they need more. It's outdated and it's unsafe. I just got an email yesterday of a farm that had this similar situation and where the fence was actually not in good condition. And a 1-year-old was just dangling from the fence, basically. So in order, we're not also helping the environment and keeping, things clean, but we're also keeping families and children safe by having, safe practices that are not going to be causing any issues in the future. So this is important for us too. So this happens very often as well, that we see manure tanks that are outdated, the fence is falling apart. Heavy use area, again, this is a very wide range, a name for a number of practices, basically, as barnyard stabilization could be considered a heavy use area. But in this case, we have on the left what used to be the facility for the baby calves. Under that structure hutch, there was not anything, like it was bare ground, and therefore all the runoff was still happening there somehow, although it has a structure to cover for water, but there was not water spoutings or anything. Whereas on the right, now it has been stabilized. There is grass filters around, and it's making its job. In addition to keeping the water clean, many of these best management practices are also improving the animal welfare of the animals. We're having healthier animals because they have drier condition, better air conditions, and the farmers are spending less time, treating sick animals. So it's a win-win for everybody when we invest in conservation. This is another popular barnyard stabilization. On the left, we have this farm that was having issues with this barnyard, didn't have any manure storage. We came and stabilized that barnyard. Now it has concrete. And then at the end of that concrete aisle, we had a manure storage too. So the farmer was just pushing the manure to the to the tank. So yeah. And again, the most popular or favorite, let's say that, practice is the riparian forest buffers. You can see a photo on the top, how was looking this farm. The animals were right off from the stream. No vegetation, no trees. Now at the bottom, we finally fenced off that stream and we have planted buffers. And again, we are very committed to buffers to the point that we have committed over agricultural programs to the buffers 100%. So farmers that want to work with us and have a stream running in their property that needs a buffer, they would need to get a buffer in order to get our support. Otherwise, we would not work with that farm. So we have learned that we can move the needle and we're going to push it and we're going to ask them to do it. And we have been successful and we're very happy that our partners as well are doing the same thing. We have the Lancaster Clean Water partners that got an RCPP likewise we did, that are also requesting buffers. So that's very important. Like we are now also leaders in our community and we are somehow influencing, what our partners are doing as well with their work. This is a photo of one large ag buffer that we planted last fall. This is 12 acres that we were able to implement in a farm in Peach Bottom in Lancaster. This was a project with Hershey and Llano Lakes. And although it looks kind of a small, it has 12 acres. And this is how it looks more from the ground. I just thought it was a beautiful photo. So we are very excited to do this kind of work with our partners, and we have brought them to the plantings and engaging with them, and they are learning more about it. These corporations are learning more about it, learning about the Amish, learning about the communities, and they want to support it. So we think that we are very thankful, and we also lucky to have a strong community, farming community, also strong support from our corporate partners. And with that, hopefully we have enough time to do questions. I don't know what time is it. Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Okay, it's on. Yeah, we're a little bit over. It's about 10 till, but we started late, so.
Yeah, I guess we can take a couple of brief questions. Yes, Alec.
Mauricio, I don't want to put you on the spot. One of the things I want to explore is you've done a really good job about going out and working with Plain Sect farmers. Plain Sect farmers, like those with the Green Barn, are all the same. And there's some bishops that embrace conservation and for their communities embrace it, and others that have. How do we penetrate to reach those tougher audiences? What kind of discussions are going on? What kind of farmers?
Yeah, the question for those folks joining us online, there are some bishops that are more in the Amish community that are more conservatives, and they might not be so keen on conservation. How can we influence those communities that are more conservative and they're not still very progressive towards conservation? And that's an excellent question. We continue to work with anyone and everybody. We have seen that when one farmer has completed a project, then the neighbor is very curious about it. So that keeps happening around until at one point, we hope that the bishops see that what we have done is changing the lives of their communities. As I said, this work is not only for the environment, it's for our community. And many of these farmers' livelihood is improving, their bottom line is improving, less debt. So I think those bishops that are more conservatives are seeing those effects. We have been successful in the south part of Lancaster County in the Octorero, where it's no, excuse me, what is known for being more conservative. And we have had farmers that have told us that their neighbors are looking at it, that they're interested. So hopefully this more conservative communities are going to be saying yes to us. We have noticed that when the funding comes through nonprofits such as the Alliance, they tend to say yes to us just because, again, we keep things simple and flexible. So honestly, it's just the message, I think, is just like what we're doing, it's having an effect, and I think farmers are seeing it, and hopefully we're going to reach to those communities. So I don't think there is really a silver bullet to see how we can, like, I could meet with all those bishops and explain and show all this, but I don't know if they're really gonna, you know, say yes just by having a conversation. I think the actions speak better than anything else.
Do you have a 11 o'clock in here? Do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap up now?
I think.
Do you want to take the online question?
Sure, we can take the online question.
Also, how are you holding these big corporations accountable to follow through on their vision?
All right, that's a 3-section question. But just briefly, these corporations are investing in these farms more and more. They are interested in improving water quality and air quality. And at the beginning, they were not aware of what were the benefits of all these practices and projects. So educating these corporations is important, showing them that the work that we're doing is important, not only for the environment, but for the communities, has been also something that those corporations are supportive of, and how we can make them accountable for it. I think you can do that. I think all the consumers can do it. So if we, ask these corporations to do it, trust me, they listen to you, and they're going to be supporting farmers and trying to do this work better. I guess maybe one more. Someone was trying to ask a question before Alec. I don't know if this person, but it was you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. For those folks online, the question was if we cover 100% for these practices and projects. We try to. We are very good at stacking resources and funding. If we know a partner that has funding in the area, for instance, Lancaster Clean Water Partners has an RCPP, we know that we can tap into it, that they're in the farm is in an area that they are looking to do work, we'll go with them and then we'll secure funding. Sometimes we don't have all the funding up front, but we're constantly looking for funding. Like if we have a set of farms that are interested in conservation and we want them to help, we want to help them with more funding, we sometimes just go after more funding from NFWIP usually to try to cover 100%. We do our best, but we, yes, stack funding after funding to make this happen. Yeah, that's one of our, I guess, our fortes. Alrighty, I think we just need to wrap it up for now.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you all for
Thank you all.
joining and thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you.